Every thought you have ever accepted as true about yourself was planted. Not chosen, not reasoned, not arrived at through careful examination of the evidence. Planted. By repetition, by the people around you, by the circumstances you grew up in, by a voice inside your own head that has been running the same program for so long, you have mistaken it for reality. The man who believes he is not capable of great achievement did not arrive at that belief through logic. He arrived at it because someone, or something, told him so, repeatedly, over a long enough period of time, that his subconscious accepted it as fact. And from that moment forward, his subconscious began doing what it always does, proving itself right. Every opportunity filtered through the lens of, I am not capable. Every obstacle interpreted as confirmation. Every success dismissed as luck. Every failure filed as evidence. The program runs. The man lives out its conclusions, and he calls it reality. What I am about to teach you in this lecture is the method by which that program is rewritten. Not gradually, not partially, but completely, if you are willing to apply what I am about to tell you with the same consistency and persistence that planted the original program in the first place. The principle is called autosuggestion, and it is the most powerful tool available to any man who understands how to use it. What autosuggestion actually is. I want to be precise about what I mean by autosuggestion, because it is one of the most misunderstood words in the study of the human mind. Most men hear it and think of affirmations, positive statements repeated in front of a mirror, declarations of wealth and success spoken into the air by a man who does not yet believe them. And because that image is slightly absurd, they dismiss the principle entirely. That is a mistake that will cost them everything the principle could have produced. Autosuggestion is not positive thinking in the casual sense. It is not the habit of telling yourself that everything will be fine. It is not optimism dressed in repetitive language. It is the agency of communication between the conscious and the subconscious mind. That is my precise definition, and every word of it matters. Agency, meaning it is active. It is something you do, not something that happens to you. Communication, meaning information is being transmitted from one part of the mind to another, between the conscious and the subconscious, meaning the deliberate reasoning mind is sending instructions to the deeper mind that operates below the level of conscious thought and controls the vast majority of a man's behavior. When you understand it in those terms, it is not absurd at all. It is mechanical. It is a description of a process that is already happening in every human mind, every hour of every day, whether the man understands it or not. The question autosuggestion answers is not whether your subconscious is receiving instructions. It always is. The question is whether you are the one giving them. Think of the subconscious mind as a piece of fertile soil. It does not care what you plant in it. It does not judge the seed. It does not distinguish between a weed and a crop. It simply grows whatever it is given, with equal enthusiasm, equal efficiency, and equal indifference to whether the harvest serves you or destroys you. Most men spend their entire lives letting the wind decide what gets planted. Whatever thought blows through, fear, doubt, limitation, resentment, takes root, grows, and eventually produces a harvest the man did not intend and cannot explain. Autosuggestion is the act of choosing the seed deliberately, of walking into that field with a specific crop in mind and planting it with intention, with care, and with the understanding that what you plant today will determine what you harvest tomorrow. That is what this principle is, not magic, not mysticism, not the wishful thinking of men who refuse to engage with reality. A method, precise, repeatable, and available to any man willing to learn it. How the subconscious actually receives information. Now, I want to explain something that most men get wrong, and getting it wrong is the reason most attempts to apply this principle fail. The subconscious mind does not respond to words. I want you to hear that clearly. Words alone, no matter how precisely chosen, no matter how often repeated, do not reach the subconscious. They pass through the conscious mind, are noted, and leave nothing behind. The subconscious responds to feeling. Emotion is the carrier signal. It is the medium through which a thought travels from the surface of the mind to its depths. Without emotion, a thought is just noise. With emotion, it becomes an instruction. This is why most people's attempts at affirmations and positive thinking produce nothing. They stand in front of a mirror and recite statements they do not believe, feel nothing while reciting them, and wonder why their subconscious remains unconvinced. The subconscious is not unconvinced. It is simply not listening, because the signal that would make it listen, genuine feeling, is absent. I observed this consistently across my years of research. The men who had successfully programmed their subconscious minds toward a definite goal were not men who had simply thought about their goal more than others. They were men who had felt it. They had held their desire in their minds with such genuine emotion, such vivid, specific, emotionalized clarity, that the subconscious had accepted it not as a possibility, but as an instruction to be carried out. So the formula is this: a specific thought plus genuine emotion plus consistent repetition equals a new dominant belief in the subconscious mind. Remove any one of those three elements and the formula fails. Specificity without emotion, the subconscious ignores it. Emotion without specificity, energy without direction, producing nothing useful. Specificity and emotion without repetition, a single impression that fades before it can take root. All three, always, without exception. And here I want to address something directly. Some men will hear this and say, "But I do not feel anything when I think about my goal. I want it, yes, but I do not feel the kind of emotion you are describing." To those men I say this: the feeling does not have to be present before you begin. It develops through the process. A man who reads his written statement with genuine attention, who visualizes himself in possession of what he desires, who does this consistently, morning and night, day after day, will find that the feeling begins to grow on its own, not because he manufactured it, but because the subconscious, once it begins to accept the instruction, starts to produce the emotional response that confirms the belief. Begin without the feeling if you must, but begin. Something that most lectures on this subject carefully avoid, because it is uncomfortable, because it requires a man to look at himself with an honesty that most men prefer not to apply. But I have never believed that comfortable lectures produce uncomfortable change, and uncomfortable change is precisely what most men need. Every man listening to this lecture is already practicing autosuggestion, right now, every day, with extraordinary consistency and remarkable effectiveness. The problem is the direction. The internal monologue that tells a man he is not smart enough, that is autosuggestion. The habit of replaying past failures in vivid detail, that is autosuggestion. The automatic assumption that an opportunity is not for men like him, that is autosuggestion. The language a man uses about himself in private: "I always fail at this. I never follow through. I am not the kind of person who succeeds at that level," that is autosuggestion. And it has been working perfectly. Every one of those thoughts, repeated with feeling over a long enough period of time, has been received by the subconscious as an instruction. And the subconscious, faithful, efficient, indifferent, has been carrying it out. organizing the man's perception to find evidence that confirms what it has been told, filtering his decisions through the lens of the limitations it has been given, producing results entirely consistent with the program it has been running. The man looks at his life and sees failure, and he asks, why? The answer is that he has been the most diligent practitioner of autosuggestion in his own life, and he has been using it against himself for years. Now I want you to sit with that for a moment, not with shame, not with self-condemnation. Those are just more negative inputs feeding the same machine. Sit with it as information, as a diagnosis, because a diagnosis, however uncomfortable, is the beginning of a cure. Once a man understands that his limiting beliefs were planted by repetition, he understands that they can be replaced by repetition. The same mechanism that installed the program can be used to rewrite it. But here is what I need you to understand about that process. The old program does not simply erase itself the moment you begin installing a new one. It resists, it reasserts, it produces doubt, cynicism, and the persistent feeling that what you are doing is foolish. That resistance is not evidence that the method is failing. It is evidence that it is working. The old program is fighting for survival, and the only thing that defeats it is the same thing that created it. Repetition. Consistent, persistent, emotionalized repetition of the new instruction until the new program becomes dominant and the old one fades for lack of reinforcement. I want to name the specific forms negative autosuggestion takes, because a man cannot correct what he cannot identify. The first is the rehearsal of past failures. Most men believe that thinking about a past failure is a neutral act, a kind of emotional processing that eventually leads to acceptance and release. It is not. Every time a man returns to a past failure in his mind, replays it, re-examines it, retells it, he is not processing it, he is practicing it. He is feeding it back into the subconscious with fresh emotion attached, reinforcing the neural pathway, deepening the groove. The subconscious does not know that the event is in the past. It receives the thought as a current input and responds accordingly. A man who replays a failure every morning is, from his subconscious's perspective, failing every morning. And his behavior, his decisions, his risk tolerance, his response to new opportunities reflects that. This does not mean a man should never examine his failures. Examination with the intent to extract a lesson and move forward is entirely different from rehearsal with the intent, conscious or not, to confirm a belief about oneself. One is productive, the other is destructive. Know which one you are doing. The second form is catastrophic projection. The habit of imagining the worst possible outcome of any endeavor in vivid, emotionalized detail before the endeavor has even begun. Most men who do this believe they are being realistic, prudent, responsible. They are not. They are practicing autosuggestion in its most damaging form, using the imagination not to create a compelling vision of what they intend to build, but to create a compelling vision of what they fear will happen. And the subconscious, which cannot distinguish between a memory and an imagination, between something that has happened and something that has been vividly pictured, receives that vision as an instruction. A man who spends 20 minutes every morning imagining his business failing has spent 20 minutes programming his subconscious for failure. Regardless of how hard he works for the remaining hours of the day, he is working against a program he installed himself before breakfast. The third form is comparative diminishment. The automatic habit of measuring oneself against others and consistently arriving at an unfavorable conclusion. He is smarter than me. She had better opportunities. They started with advantages I do not have and will never have. Each of these comparisons, delivered with the feeling of resignation or resentment that typically accompanies them, is an instruction to the subconscious. You are less. You are behind. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is too large to close. And the subconscious, faithful as always, begins producing results consistent with less, begins making decisions appropriate for a man who is behind, begins interpreting the gap as permanent rather than temporary. I observed this pattern repeatedly in the men I studied who had failed despite genuine ability. They were not less capable than the men who succeeded around them. They were less convinced, and their subconscious was acting on that conviction with perfect efficiency. The fourth, and perhaps the most insidious, is the private language a man uses about himself. I always do this. I never manage to follow through. I am just not disciplined enough. I am not the kind of person who achieves at that level. These statements feel like observations. They feel like honest self-assessment, the kind of clear-eyed realism that a man mistakes for maturity. They are not observations. They are instructions. Every time a man says, "I always," he is programming always. Every time he says, "I never," he is programming never. Every time he says, "I am not the kind of person who," he is drawing a boundary around his own potential and instructing his subconscious to respect it. And the subconscious, which has no interest in arguing, no capacity for skepticism, no mechanism for questioning what it is given, accepts the boundary and operates within it. Once a man understands this, he can no longer claim his limiting beliefs arrived by accident. He has been their author. And from this point forward, every thought he entertains is a choice. Now we arrive at the part of this lecture that separates the men who understand autosuggestion from the men who apply it. Because understanding a principle produces nothing, application produces everything. Here is the method, precisely as I have prescribed it, with the understanding of why each element is non-negotiable. You have already written your statement, the exact figure, the exact date, what you will give in return, the beginning of a plan. If you have not written it, stop this lecture, write it, and return. Because everything I am about to tell you requires that statement as its foundation. Nothing works without it. The statement is the seed. What I am about to describe is how you plant it. Step 1. Read your statement aloud. Not silently, aloud. There is a reason for this that goes beyond habit or ritual. When a man reads silently, his conscious mind processes the words and moves on. When he reads aloud, he hears his own voice making the statement. And the act of hearing oneself say something with conviction has a different and deeper effect on the subconscious than reading alone. The voice carries emotion in a way that silent reading does not. It makes the statement real in a physical sense, sound waves in the air, heard by the ear, processed by the brain, not just symbols on a page processed by the eye. Read it aloud, every time, without exception. Step 2. As you read, see yourself already in possession of what you desire. Not working toward it, not hoping for it, in possession of it. The visualization must be specific, not a vague impression of success, but a precise mental image of the exact outcome your statement describes. If your desire is a specific sum of money, see yourself holding it, spending it, giving it, using it to build what you intend to build. If your desire is a specific achievement, see yourself having achieved it in as much sensory detail as you can produce. The subconscious thinks in images and feelings, not in words. The words of your statement are the vehicle. The visualization is the destination the vehicle is carrying. Step 3. Feel it. This is the element most men skip, because feeling it requires something of them that recitation does not. It requires genuine engagement. It requires, for the duration of the reading, that they set aside their doubt and inhabit the reality they are describing. I am not asking you to deceive yourself. I am asking you to use your imagination the way it was designed to be used, to create a vivid, emotionalized experience of something that does not yet exist in physical form, but will, if the subconscious is given a clear enough instruction often enough. The feeling is the signal. Without it, the words and the visualization are a letter with no postage. They never arrive. Step 4. Do this twice daily, once immediately upon waking, once immediately before sleeping. Those two windows are not arbitrary. Upon waking, the conscious mind is moving from its most relaxed state into full alertness. The critical faculty that normally filters incoming information is not yet fully engaged. The subconscious is unusually receptive. Before sleeping, the conscious mind is moving in the opposite direction, toward rest and disengagement. Again, the critical faculty relaxes. Again, the subconscious becomes more receptive. These are the two windows in every day when the door between the conscious and subconscious mind stands most open. Use them, every day, without exception. Step 5. Persist. This is where most men fail. Not because they do not understand the method, not because they lack the time or the discipline for 2 readings per day, but because they do not see immediate results and conclude the method is not working. The subconscious does not respond to a single impression. It responds to the accumulated weight of repeated impressions over time. A single reading plants a seed that the wind can carry away. 100 readings plant a seed that has taken root. 1,000 readings plant a tree. The method fails when it is applied inconsistently. It succeeds, without exception in my observation, when it is applied with the same relentless consistency that the negative program was originally installed. And step 6, read with faith, not with doubt. This connects directly to what we examined in the previous lecture. A man who reads his statement while simultaneously doubting its possibility is sending 2 contradictory signals to his subconscious simultaneously. The subconscious, unable to act on both, defaults to the stronger signal. And in most men, at the beginning of this process, doubt is the stronger signal. This is why faith must be cultivated in parallel with autosuggestion, not as a prerequisite, but as a companion practice. Each reinforces the other. As the subconscious begins to accept the new instruction, it produces small confirmations, opportunities noticed, connections made, ideas generated, that in turn strengthen the faith that strengthens the next reading. The process is a cycle, and once it is running, it accelerates. What happens when it works? I want to tell you what I observed in the men who had mastered this principle, consciously or unconsciously, because the pattern was so consistent across 500 interviews that it cannot be dismissed as coincidence. Every man of significant achievement I ever studied had developed a dominant mental attitude so completely aligned with his goal that his subconscious was working toward it constantly, not just during the twice daily readings, but in every waking hour and, I believe, in the hours of sleep as well. Some of these men had arrived at this state deliberately. They had studied the principle, applied the method, and built their dominant mental attitude through conscious effort over time. Others had stumbled into it through circumstance, through a childhood of being told they would achieve something specific, through a defining experience that burned a particular goal so deeply into their mind that it became their dominant thought by default. But the mechanism was identical in every case. A specific desire, held in the mind with genuine emotion, repeated so consistently that the subconscious accepted it as an instruction and began organizing every available resource toward its fulfillment. What does that look like in practice? It looks like a man who wakes in the morning already thinking about his goal, not because he forces himself to, but because his subconscious has been working on it through the night and presents its findings the moment consciousness returns. It looks like a man who encounters an obstacle and immediately begins generating solutions, not because he is more creative than other men, but because his subconscious has been given a clear instruction and interprets every obstacle as a problem to be solved rather than a reason to stop. It looks like a man who notices opportunities that are invisible to the men around him, not because he is more intelligent, but because his subconscious has been told what to look for and highlights it the moment it appears. This is what the successful application of autosuggestion produces. Not magic, not luck, not the mysterious favor of fortune. A mind that has been given a clear instruction and has organized itself completely around carrying that instruction out. The man who applies this principle deliberately has one insurmountable advantage over the man who does not. He is never working alone. His conscious mind works during the hours he is awake and engaged. His subconscious works during every hour, awake or asleep, engaged or resting, moving toward the goal he has given it, solving the problems he has presented it, preparing him for the opportunities it knows he is looking for. Two minds working in the same direction, toward the same goal, without interruption. Compare that to the man whose conscious mind wants one thing and whose subconscious, running its inherited program of limitation and doubt, is working toward something else entirely. That man is not simply less productive. He is actively working against himself. Every step forward taken by conscious effort is partially undone by the subconscious program running in the opposite direction. He wonders why progress is so slow, why success requires such exhausting effort, why other men seem to move toward their goals with an ease he cannot replicate, regardless of how hard he works. The answer is alignment. When the conscious desire and the subconscious program are pointed in the same direction, the effort required to produce results decreases dramatically. Not because the work becomes less, but because all of it is moving in the same direction at the same time. Section 6. The Warning. I want to leave you with something that I consider the most serious point in this entire lecture. Autosuggestion works. I do not say that as encouragement. I say it as a warning, because a principle that works does not ask about your intentions before it operates. It does not distinguish between the man who applies it toward constructive ends and the man who, through ignorance or negligence, applies it toward destructive ones. It simply works. In whatever direction it is pointed, with whatever material it is given. A man who masters this principle and uses it deliberately to build, will build. That is the promise of autosuggestion, and it is a promise that has been kept in the lives of every man I studied who applied it correctly. But a man who understands this principle, who has sat through this lecture and grasped the mechanism, and then returns to his life and continues feeding his subconscious with fear, doubt, and limitation, is no longer doing so in ignorance. He is doing so with full knowledge of the consequences. And that changes things. Before this lecture, a man could reasonably claim that his limiting beliefs arrived without his consent, that his negative internal monologue was a habit he had not chosen and did not know how to change, that the program running in his subconscious was installed by others before he knew enough to resist it. After this lecture, none of those claims are available to him. He knows what autosuggestion is. He knows how the subconscious receives information. He knows that every thought entertained with feeling is an instruction delivered to the most powerful instrument he possesses. Every thought from this point forward is a choice. I do not say this to burden you. I say it because the weight of that responsibility, fully felt, fully understood, is itself one of the most powerful motivators a man can possess. When a man understands that his thoughts are not passive, that they are active forces shaping the instrument that shapes his life, he begins to guard them differently. He becomes selective in a way he was not before. Not because someone told him to think positive, but because he understands the mechanism well enough to know that he cannot afford not to. That selectivity, that deliberate guardianship of what is allowed to take root in the subconscious, is the mark of a man who has truly understood this principle. Not a man who recites affirmations, a man who understands that every thought is a seed, and who has decided, with full awareness of the consequences, to choose his seeds carefully. Have accepted as true about yourself was planted. That is where this lecture began, and I want to end it in the same place, because the distance between that opening statement and where you now stand is the distance this principle asks you to travel. You came into this lecture living out a script you did not write, carrying beliefs that were installed without your consent, running programs that were given to you before you were old enough to question them. You leave it with the understanding that the same mechanism that installed those programs can be used to replace them. Not gradually, not partially, completely, if you are willing to apply what you now know with the same consistency and persistence that the original program was installed. Tonight, before you sleep, read your statement, aloud, with the visualization, with the feeling, with the understanding that you are not reciting words, you are issuing instructions to the most powerful instrument you possess. And tomorrow morning, before the day has had a chance to reassert the old program, read it again. Every thought you have accepted as true about yourself was planted. That is where this lecture began. And I want to end it in the same place, because the distance between that opening statement and where you now stand is the distance this principle asks you to travel. You came into this lecture living out a script you did not write, carrying beliefs that were installed without your consent, running programs that were given to you before you were old enough to question them. You leave it with the understanding that the same mechanism that installed those programs can be used to replace them. Not gradually, not partially, completely, if you are willing to apply what you now know with the same consistency and persistence that the original program was installed. Tonight, before you sleep, read your statement, aloud, with the visualization, with the feeling, with the understanding that you are not reciting words, you are issuing instructions to the most powerful instrument you possess. And tomorrow morning, before the day has had a chance to reassert the old program, read it again. That is all the method requires. 2 readings every day, with specificity, with emotion, with persistence, and with the faith that what you are planting will grow, because it cannot do otherwise. The subconscious does not fail to produce what it is given. It has never failed. It will not fail for you. The only question, the question that has always separated the men who achieved from the men who merely wanted, is whether you will give it something worth producing.